apprehend God in all things, for God is in all things. Every single creature is filled with God and is a book about God. Amen. So a friend of mine was telling me a story the other day. He was hanging out with a group of guys, just hanging out over at this guy's house outside. And all the guys in this group, except for my friend, were in a Bible study. They are in a Bible study. Now, I'm not sure how it happened, but in no time at all, my friend and one of the Bible study guys began talking about who gets to go to heaven and who does not. A friendly little chat. Nothing bad could happen, I'm sure. It was just a nice, non-emotional chat. But what my friend was telling me is for the Bible study guy, it was cut and dry. Didn't really need to chat. Here's what he thought. Only those who believe in Jesus get to God, and only God can get you to heaven. So therefore, only those who believe in Jesus get to go to heaven. Boom. Mic drop. That's it. Only those who believe in Jesus get to go to heaven. But my friend wasn't going to be deterred so easily, so he said this. He said, this past summer, I got to know a local rabbi and his family really well. He said, he's one of the best people I know. One of the best. And he said, his family, they're just lovely, lovely people. And so he said, you mean to tell me that if they don't believe in Jesus, God will damn them to hell? What would you say to that? What do you think the guy in the Bible study said to that? Well, in case you wonder, he said, yes, that's right. Because they don't believe in Jesus, God will damn them to hell. So my friend's telling me this story, and all I'm thinking to myself, when he finished anyway, I'm thinking, are we really still talking about this? Who gets eternal reward and who gets to suffer eternal punishment? As if we get to pick, you and me? Apparently we are still talking about this. And it's surprising to me because I never think about it. And we never talk about it here. You see, I think we never talk about it because we want to just kind of let the afterlife go. Let God take care of that. And we trust that God will take care of us. So we want to focus on living our lives here, not worrying about who goes where after death. But that's not how many, if not most, Christian people think about it. Heaven and hell come up a lot. Last week, 4 people talked to me about it. So I finally decided, well, okay, if so many people are going to talk about this, I'm not going to argue with them. I'm going to try to see life from the perspective of the Bible study guy. You know what I mean? I decided I'm going to try to see life as if I were a person who thinks if a person does not believe in Jesus, then that person is doomed to hell. I decided I was going to take that on. So I brought it into my prayer life, I brought it into my meditation life, and I sat with it. And it didn't take long before I started thinking, man, lots of people are doomed. Billions upon billions of people are doomed to hell with this mindset. The Dalai Lama, out. Gandhi, out. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is suffering eternal punishment as we sit here today with this mindset. And the rabbi and his family, well, heck, they don't have a chance, right? Well, tell me something. As I say all that, how do you feel? How does that make you feel? So I tell you, for me, I don't like it. I don't like myself when I think like this one bit, because it makes me feel like a small person. And I feel like God, in this mindset, is bound by my beliefs, and therefore is a very, very, very small God. I feel mean when I think like this. I feel harsh. I feel petty. And I feel closed-minded. And I don't want to feel like that. Plus, on top of all that, it's simply not my experience. It's not my experience of life. That people should be thrown out of life simply because they believe one thing and not another. So it's not my experience of life, it's not my experience of the breadth of the Christian tradition, and it's not my experience of the scriptures we just read. Did you hear them? Well, let's just take the gospel, okay? Let's just take that. The chief priests and the elders, that's how this thing starts, with these guys. And those guys are the people who harassed Jesus the most in his life. They are a group of very, very religious people, and for whatever reason, they seem to feel superior. Maybe it's their religion, I don't know. But they seem to feel superior to Jesus, and maybe to all others. So they belittle Jesus, and they attack Jesus, and they condemn Jesus throughout his whole life. But he doesn't condemn them. Not in this passage. He does not condemn them to hell. In fact, what he tries to do is help them. He tries to help them. He says, and this is the way I'm interpreting the passage, he says, your minds are so closed, you cannot see what God is doing right in front of you. Your minds are so closed, you cannot see God working through John the Baptist. You cannot see God working through me. You cannot see God working all around you because your minds are so closed. Change your mind, he says to them. But they can't, and so they miss it. And I understand what it's like to miss things. And I hope to heaven, I hope to God, that just if I miss something doesn't mean I'm going to end up in hell. Jesus says all that to these guys, but he never says that you're going to suffer eternal punishment. Today's gospel invites us not to judge or condemn people. Today's gospel invites us to open our minds and our hearts to other people, to see God at work in and through them. Oftentimes in and through people that are different from us, because God doesn't want us to miss it. You see, I believe that God is constantly trying to get our attention. trying to open us up to God's presence in the world and in each other and all around us and everything we see. And He's constantly trying to get us to see it so that we can experience the deep acceptance of God for who we are, that our life is good, that you're who you're supposed to be. And so that we can experience God's deep desire to live in, through, and as us, just as God lived in, through, and as Jesus. A God like this doesn't damn billions of people to hell. Okay. So whenever I struggle with stuff like this, and I struggle with my people, I struggle with my fellow Christian people, whenever I do that, I turn to people within my tradition, within our tradition, who aren't so quick to condemn others. I turn to people whose God is big enough to include the whole world. The whole world. Gregory Boyle, he's a Roman Catholic priest, and he's one of those people. His God is too big, simply too big, to be bound by my beliefs, so I like to read him. And he writes this: "It is indeed a challenge to abandon the long-held belief that God yearns to blame and punish us. It's hard to let that go for some reason. It seems to be part of our hard wiring. But even with that, he writes, we can feel God nudging us beyond our tired, atrophied complacence towards something more spacious and more open. And when we're open, we feel God's desire to dwell in us. You see, that's my experience. That's how I experience God. That's how I experience life. And he tells this story. It's a story of a young woman named Letty. And Letty came to see him one day. And he says Letty has had as hard a life as you can possibly imagine. Name any terrible, horrific thing that can happen to a human being, and she has experienced it. And then she's made bad choices to just pile on to that. She's experienced drug addiction. She's experienced domestic violence. And yes, she's experienced prison. And that's just the beginning. The list goes on. Father Boyle says, I would not have survived one day in her childhood, not one day. So he doesn't judge her. He puts himself in her place. I wouldn't have survived one day, he says. So on this day, she's asking him for some help. And as she's asking for help, she just suddenly says, I wish you were God. And he starts to laugh. He thinks she's kidding around. He starts to laugh. And then he looks into her eyes and he sees they're welling up and she's starting to cry. And so he realizes she's serious. So he asks, well, Letty, why do you wish I was God? And it takes her a long time to compose herself, as she's crying so hard now. But finally, through her tears, she quietly says, 'Cause if you were God, I think you would let me into heaven. And through his tears, Father Boyle said this, Letty, I swear to you, if I get to heaven and you're not there, and I know you'll be there, but if for some strange reason you're not there, I'm not staying. Amen.